It was so intimately tragic. 16 people died, 13 people were injured. And if you think about even the immediate families for those people, say 10 each, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people immediately affected. There's a lot of pressure on a reporter and team in this situation because, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to ask people who've lost their sons and daughters to talk to you. And many of them don't want to, and many of them express that firmly. And I always said, I understand. I totally understand. But then there are people like Scott Thomas who needed to talk.
His first goal from his SJHL career.
Scott Thomas is a hockey father. He lost his son Evan, who was 18. He was in a car behind his son's team bus and tried to get through to the accident site and was barred by police that night.
We go running up and they stop us and can't go any further. And you could see it was bad.
And Scott Thomas told me a story I'll never forget. He said that as a boy, Evan had a birthmark on his cheek, a little one. And he used to come home from school sometimes crying because kids, they're mean, they would tease him about having that birthmark. And Scott told his son, don't worry about it. It's part of you. It's what makes you unique. And then he said, I never thought I'd have to identify my child's body looking at that birthmark. And I was so grateful to him to be able to tell us about Evan. And I think it helped the Thomas family at the time. I can only imagine that's why he spoke to my colleague Dan Zakreski and myself. And we found that a lot, that the parents who did want to speak about this needed to talk.
He knows he has a wealth of support. So
one of the women that we spoke to less than 48 hours after the accident was Michelle Stratsnitsky. And of course her son Ryan, 18, was paralyzed from the mid-chest down. And she said she'd just been at a conference with the doctor who told her it's unlikely that your son will walk again, certainly won't skate upright again. And she was able to tell us that. And I formed a pretty strong bond with Michelle out there in the cold on the riverbanks of the Saskatchewan River, because I'm a mother of 2 boys, hockey age, late teens. And immediately I could relate to her. Hi, Ryan.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Finally.
Yeah.
2.5 weeks after the Humboldt bus crash, I was able to interview Ryan for the first time, and I'll never forget it. I had this feeling when he came into the room in his wheelchair. I was so grateful and relieved to finally meet this kid I'd heard so much about. Where do you set your goals now?
I just set my goals, like if I have to get into a wheelchair today, I'm gonna sit that longer than I did yesterday.
And then we decided to follow him for the next 5 months, and that was the best part. Ryan convinced me that legs don't define him. They simply
2,
don't.
1, and stop.
On the night of September 12th, the Broncos had their first game on the ice since the tragedy, the new team. And it was a huge packed arena back in Humboldt, and there was a formal memorial going to happen after that game. It was, I would say, one of the most poignant and painful moments. And I watched this one man, and as his son's name was read, he didn't cry, he wouldn't, but his eyes welled up with tears. And, I was very conscious of that time that I did not want to intrude on this private event at all. So I didn't. And the next day, we were in the hotel where we were staying, and I went to have breakfast, and I was sitting in a booth. And that father was in the booth ahead of me, and I said, okay, it's private now, I can go up and approach him. And I did, and introduced myself and said, you don't know me, but I want to tell you, I really hope that in some way you're getting some solace from the memory of your son and how difficult it's been, and just wanted to say hello. And he had a ball cap on, and he just looked up at me and he said, thanks. I went back and finished my breakfast, and he got out, left the restaurant, and I got up to leave and went to pay, and the waitress said to me, you don't have to pay. He said, that man you were talking to paid for your breakfast. Still makes me emotional, because I thought how wonderful for him to be that kind. And that was the quality of people that we saw throughout the Humboldt Broncos story. These strong, resolute hockey families who had endured the worst ever imaginable event in their lives. And they got through it, and they're getting through it.